Unmentionable contains depictions of domestic violence, sexual assault, suicidal ideation, and pornography. This podcast is intended for ages 13 and older. We recommend parents listen through before or alongside their child.
Previously on Unmentionable.
I'm walking into this church and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for a pastor. Andrew taught me how to learn well. He allowed me to understand what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. A year and a half in, I started giving away classes. I was just obsessed. I've had a dream where I'm getting closer to this mountain. There's a lion with me, and there's some people that are in the water and need to be saved. I've got something to share. Started writing talks, sermons. Dramatic change started to take place. This is what I want to do the rest of my life. I proposed to her at that pep rally, and if I could help one person get one video taken down, that feeling of redemption came over.
Change is sparked by the courage of individuals, those who boldly challenge and rethink often accepted conventions. This type of change possesses an infectious energy, and once ignited, it spreads, kindling transformation and inspiring others to act. I'm your host, Lee Shelton, and this is Unmentionable, a journey through the life of a prodigal porn star and a look behind the curtain of a $100 billion industry. Chapter 8, Mr. Broome Goes to Washington. We've spent a lot of time unpacking Josh's experience in Hollywood and shining a light on how problematic the porn industry is for society. But what we haven't done is talk about the solutions to those problems. We're about to cover a lot of ground. We'll listen to a trauma nurse talk about the effects of porn consumption on teen and preteen behavior. We'll talk to a sex industry survivor about her work with sex trafficking victims in Las Vegas. We'll discuss the effects of AI on pornography. We'll talk to legal counsel about legislation for consent in pornography. And we'll hear from a survivor of a sexual assault who spearheaded a grassroots movement to get a law passed. Like I said, there's a lot of ground to cover, and we're starting off with something that's going to be hard to listen to, but it's vital for understanding a problem that most people don't even realize exists.
So I am a sexual assault nurse examiner. It's a type of nursing where we are trained to take care of victims of a crime. So I specifically see pediatric patients.
This is Heidi Olson, and in this interview, what we discussed was nothing short of disturbing.
But what I always just assumed was, if a kid's been sexually assaulted, the perpetrator will be this, 67-year-old creep that lives in a basement, that's luring kids down there with kittens and candy or, whatever stereotype we have. What I started to quickly find out as I'm taking care of kids, I'm writing down the perpetrator's ages, and they're 11, 12, 10. Wait a second. Why are kids violently sexually assaulting other kids? And is this just an anomaly where I live?
As you can imagine, we've done an incredible amount of research around the connection between porn consumption and sexual assault. But what we learned from Heidi is some of the most shocking and heartbreaking information that we've uncovered in this entire series. We had the same question Heidi had. Surely this is an anomaly to one specific area because this can't be happening on a widespread basis.
When we look at the age ranges of our perpetrators, 11 to 15-year-old males are making up the biggest age range of perpetrators. So it's massive, and we're seeing hundreds of sexual assault victims at our hospital. So we know many of them are being assaulted by other children. We are hearing the same echoes from child advocacy centers, other forensic programs where they're seeing the same things. The majority of their perpetrators in the United Kingdom are now kids who are sexually assaulting other kids. And Australia, same thing. In January, they just released a study saying we're seeing a huge number of minors who are sexually assaulting other minors. Canada is seeing similar trends as well. Some countries are collecting this data, some are not. Some want to publish it, some do not.
In an effort to protect minors in the United States, very little is shared with the general public. In many cases, even the minor committing the violent act is a victim of the porn industry. However, the lack of information in the public sphere leaves parents with very little data on the breadth of the problem.
And what I started to unravel was just this horrifying connection between pornography influencing kids. And now other countries are publishing data, like in Australia and the UK, showing kids now make up the biggest age range of perpetrators in those countries. There's overwhelming evidence that shows kids act out what they see. They have mirror neurons. Of course, if a child's consuming pornography over and over and over again, it's not unlikely that they're going to act it out, especially if they have other trauma, attachment disorders, other things that are going on, the combination of porn. And then this trauma is just like throwing gasoline on a fire.
When the primary sexual education in a child's life is pornography, it becomes the main influence on their sexual ethic. And those consequences go far beyond sex on a screen.
When I bring it up, all the adults in the room just want to stick their head in the sand. Nope, don't want to talk about it. We want to pretend like this isn't happening. You're blowing this out of proportion, whatever it may be. Even though we are seeing these trends, we know at any given time, a kid with a tablet, an iPhone, whatever, a screen, they're 2 clicks away from pornography at any given time. So we're crazy if we think that they're not seeing this. They absolutely are. I have a colleague, he went to a rural school in Missouri. The school was so small, they only had 140 students. That's it. So tiny little community. And he teaches about, online safety, pornography, things like that with the students and the teachers. So the teacher said, our students are not looking at pornography. Like, that's not something we need to address. That's not an issue here. And he's like, okay, just keep track of what they're looking at, what websites they're going to for a month on their school-issued laptops. So in 1 month, and this was just a few months ago, in one rural school with only 140 students, Pornhub was searched 13,000 times. 13,000. That is every student going to Pornhub 3 times every day for a month on their school-issued device. We know huge numbers of kids are being exposed to pornography at really, really young ages. Of course, it's going to have an effect on them.
I'm a dad, and I know that this can be uncomfortable to hear as a parent. In fact, the most frequent question that I've personally received since starting this series is from parents asking how to prepare and protect their children. And in response to that, we're working on a special episode for parents with practical solutions. Heidi told us about a specific time she shared this information and how some in the room would rather deny it than face it.
Because this is not highly publicized, it is so shocking. The first time people hear about it, they're like, no way that, I think there's cognitive dissonance around it, honestly. Sometimes, just as a side note, I was presenting at a conference a couple months ago, and I'm talking to a group of first responders about this, and I think sometimes there's almost this, like, she cannot be telling the truth. So one of the comments I got back in the evaluation was, I think this is all opinion-based. I don't think it's research-based, right? Like, I think it's just her. I would never stand on this platform if I did not have research after research after research article, because it's so wild, like, to make these connections and almost accusations without being able to say, no, I can actually show peer-reviewed research and tons of data that backs it. So I think for people who are thinking maybe that's just her, it's absolutely not. I've talked to many first responders saying the same things.
I asked Heidi to share a specific story. And what she says can be hard to hear, but it will give you an idea of the ramifications that porn has on a young, developing mind.
Here's what it looks like in real life. So, for example, we saw a 13-year-old girl whose older teenage brother had raped her. And that night he said to her, I'm looking at porn and I can't stop thinking about it. So there's this direct connection where it's not just maybe in theory, porn might influence kids to do these things. It absolutely is. And we hear it all the time from kids who are assaulted. Yes, this boy told me he was looking at this, or he wanted to act out this fantasy. But we also see trends. We know mainstream porn, like what a kid's going to see within 2 seconds of being on Pornhub or whatever else they're looking at or being exposed to. They're seeing tons of strangulation, really violent, like anal pounding. They're seeing multiple men penetrating one woman, ejaculation on the face. So, of course, we see those things happening in sexual assaults because they're acting out what they're seeing. So I'm not talking about just, oh, a kid was curious and showed their body parts to this kid. Like, I'm talking about what meets the definition of sexual assault in these cases.
A silent global phenomenon is happening. Kids are abusing kids. And I keep asking myself, why haven't I heard about this before?
Because we have all these different systems that are at play when a child is involved with a crime that are not communicating with each other, we really do not have a streamlined process. So it's like Child Protective Services may be involved for a little while, maybe a hospital, maybe the juvenile justice system, right? Who knows who's even keeping data out of those different groups? It's not on anybody's radar. And it's not until we have these kind of conversations of like, hey, do you think porn played a role with this assault, that all the frontline responders were like, oh, I never even thought about that.
You don't know what you don't know. So when systems aren't communicating with each other and parents aren't communicating with their children about the dangers of porn, what you don't know can hurt you. We made this series because we believed that silence around uncomfortable topics was causing a significant amount of harm. When we think of sex trafficking, we think of a child snatched from their home, moved to another country, and sold for sex. And that happens every day. The International Labor Organization and other agencies working against human trafficking and modern slavery provide estimates that can offer some insight into the scale of the problem. The ILO estimated in 2017 that there were about 4.8 million people forced into sexual exploitation worldwide. But many experts that we spoke with believe that the legal definition for sex trafficking is even broader than what we imagined.
My name is Samantha Summers-Rivas. I am the founder and CEO of Ruby's LV. We help women and children that have been sexually exploited, trafficked, and or abused.
Samantha runs a faith-based nonprofit committed to addressing and preventing sex trafficking in Las Vegas, and she's a survivor of the sex industry.
My mom started working 10-hour days, cleaning homes as a housekeeper in California. I had a neighbor who worked at an all-nude strip club in North Hollywood, California. When I would go sit and visit with her in her apartment, I would see piles of money. So I was like, how are you doing this? She basically told me, I'm working at this strip club down the way here. You can come and work. I worked there for about 3 years on and off. And it was dangerous in there. I was then pregnant with my daughter, and I thought, I'm just going to work all the way until the end, because the reality is guys will pay more money for that. It's a fetish. And I had seen other gals in the club work all the way through their pregnancy. One gal worked all the way up until a week before she gave birth. When I started looking back at that and realizing that there were traffickers in the club, that there were girls that were falling into addiction, whether it was alcohol or drugs, I didn't realize that could also be me. It's kind of like you're just seeing landmines going off, as you're walking on a battlefield, and you're just oblivious to the fact that you're probably going to walk on a landmine. By the grace of God, I didn't. So I wound up leaving. That was a really tough time to navigate, being a brand new parent. And then on top of that, all the trauma that had compounded on top of my childhood sexual trauma, all the trauma that had compounded while I was in there. And now I'm trying to sift through and process all that. And so that was a very difficult time for me. Somebody invited me to church service for Easter. I broke down crying. I just started crying because I couldn't believe that somebody thought that I was worthy enough to go to church. They didn't know anything about my past. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I would still be invited if they knew. am I going to be allowed to stay? So we go in and the pastor does his whole sermon. And then at the end, they do the altar call. I almost feel like I must have crawled over chairs to get to that altar. For me, that was truly the beginning of my healing. I had tried so many other things. I had tried drugs. I had tried new age stuff. I had tried witchcraft. At one point in time, I was heavy into witchcraft. The pruning process was definitely an experience in and of itself. So we kept going to church, kept healing, kept processing. I met Annie Lobert from Hookers for Jesus. In 2018, we founded Ruby's LV. I had already been doing ministry work, working alongside with Annie, and we just been serving women and children and their families. It's a long process. It's getting to know these families. It's getting to know these girls. It's building trust and rapport, seeing what their needs are.
Samantha uses a term here that I know that we've heard many times, but I asked her to give us a working definition of sex trafficking.
The professional definition of it is anybody being sold by someone using force, fraud, or coercion, and then them making monetary gain off of that person, right? So that's the definition that all law enforcement uses, all government entities. I think what winds up happening is because when you're in the sex industry, we don't talk like that. When they're saying, do you think you're being trafficked, by somebody using force, fraud, or coercion? These gals are sitting there and they're like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? But then I come in and I just start talking to them like how we talk. It's looking dry out here today. I was down by the bar. I didn't see a lot of tricks out there. Are you okay? Do you have a pee? Where's your dude at? Is he here on the property? And once somebody can identify that you're protecting them, that's a quick way to build rapport. It's just super organic, totally led by the Holy Spirit, right? It's those conversations that are so deep and so sincere, and the girls are just looking to you for even a temporary piece of relief, right? We don't sensationalize it. We don't tokenize their story, right? We have a way to communicate with this demographic that other people just don't.
Samantha is able to speak to this group in a language they can understand. She even has a section on our organization's website that is for sex industry workers only. I asked her to describe an average day in the life of a person committed to serving this often forgotten people.
The highs are high and the lows are incredibly low. As I'm celebrating the birth of a baby, I'm also attending a funeral. Or I'm watching a family pull a girl off of life support because she was beat basically to death. There's all these bad things going on, and then we'll have a breakthrough. A girl will decide she wants to go after her trafficker. I want to fight this. I want to move forward. A girl decides, hey, I want to start going to therapy. A gal meets somebody and they're about to get married when that gal thought nobody was ever going to love them. It's such an emotional place to be in, seeing gals in the hospital on life support dying, to then celebrating new life, celebrating marriage, celebrating the success of saying, I'm in a spot now where I want to get therapy. I'm in a spot now where I think I want to learn a trade. I'm in a spot now where I think I want to become a paralegal or a lawyer or a nurse. It's a huge honor to be a part of that. And that's such a blessing for me.
Our world is so quick to turn people into products. It happens with porn, it happens with human trafficking, and now technology has made it possible digitally. It doesn't take much digging to realize that artificial intelligence technology is here. On November 30th, 2022, a company called OpenAI launched ChatGPT, which stands for Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It was the first generative AI model that was open to the public, free, and most notably, didn't have a clunky, cold response that every other chatbot had at that point. Shortly after the release and adoption of ChatGPT, Google and Microsoft quickly released their own generative AI models. For most of the population, it's entertainment, helping people write emails and make mundane tasks a bit easier. But more complex models are being developed for more complex tasks. Tesla has self-driving cars. The medical industry is developing technology to help diagnose diseases, and traders on Wall Street are even using it to time the market. But what about AI's impact on pornography? In the early 2000s, we saw the beginning of digital photo manipulation. People started calling this photoshopping, based off of the program used to manipulate these photos. All of a sudden, you were able to Photoshop yourself into any photo. You could include yourself in a photo with your favorite celebrity, put yourself on the beach, or slim your waistline with just a few clicks. With the rise of AI, this process has been drastically streamlined. Given the right information, there are certain models of artificial intelligence that can produce photos that were never taken and videos that were never recorded. This type of media is called deepfakes. This can be a very useful tool. You can de-age actors and even use old footage of deceased actors to bring them back to life. However, deepfakes can be used in pornography too. You can put anyone in a porn scene. All you need is a few photos of their face. The more photos of someone that you can feed the deepfake model, the more realistic the results will be.
Sexual deepfake photos of Taylor Swift went viral.
Artificial images, deep fakes of Taylor Swift, explicit in nature, shared 47 million times.
They're calling these AI-generated images alarming.
In January 2024, someone posted a library of explicit AI-generated photos of Taylor Swift. By the time social platforms got around to removing the photos, it was too late. They'd been downloaded and reposted hundreds of thousands of times. As of the release of this episode, there's no federal regulation around deepfake pornography. In fact, there's not much regulation around AI at all. In 2023, SAG-AFTRA, the largest union for actors, journalists, recording artists, and other media professionals, went on strike for 4 months, demanding compensation for the use of their likenesses through AI. They eventually struck a deal with the major studios, but it was a hard-fought battle. If it was that difficult for the largest actors union in Hollywood to get regulation around AI, you can only imagine how impossible it must feel for the performers in the adult film industry. We went with Josh to our nation's capital to bring some of these concerns to lead counsels of several members of Congress.
My name is Christen Price. I am Senior Legal Counsel with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. We are dedicated to eradicating all forms of sexual abuse and exploitation by exposing the links between them. And within our law center, we're working to represent survivors of sex trafficking and other exploitation, especially against mainstream corporations that were either complicit in and or profiting from their abuse.
We sat down with Christen to discuss some of their cases, but started the conversation by asking her about the legal definition of sex trafficking.
So for background, under 18 U.S.C. 1591, sex trafficking occurs wherever there is a commercial sex act involving either a person under the age of 18 or a person who's been induced into it by force, fraud, or coercion.
The debate on Section 230 has been raging since its advent. In the 1950s, bookstore owners got caught up in legal battles over selling books that were considered obscene at the time. The Supreme Court stepped in, ruling that businesses like bookstores that host publications could not be held liable for content that somebody else published. In the mid-90s, big players in the early internet like CompuServe and Prodigy set up online forums. CompuServe took a very passive role in vetting what was posted, while Prodigy was actively moderating content. Much like today, politicians got caught up in debate over whether these companies were responsible for this content or not. So in 1996, the Communication Decency Act was passed. Section 230 of the CDA states that, quote, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider For those of us who don't speak legal, it basically means that these companies are clear to behave like a public bulletin board that anyone can contribute to regardless of their viewpoints, and that the owners of that bulletin board won't get in trouble for the content posted on it.
The Nicosi Law Center has been involved alongside some different partner law firms in a number of cases against the pornography industry where we've had to deal with this Section 230 issue and this question of whether FOSTA, the exception provision, covers the kinds of cases we're bringing. So we have a case against MindGeek/ALO, which runs Pornhub, for knowingly benefiting from sex trafficking. It's specifically sex trafficking on the basis of child sexual abuse material. We succeeded against them on a motion to dismiss 2 years ago, with the judge basically saying they don't even get 230 protection because they're essentially a content provider themselves. They do too much work changing the tags, changing the titles, moderating the content, advising people on how to create content. They're just implicated.
The biggest internet porn companies' headquarters are all outside of America, even though the United States comprises most of their customers. Pornhub is in Montreal, and their biggest competitor is in Prague, which begs the question, how is this strategic from a legal perspective?
We also had a similar case against Xvideos, which is basically Pornhub's main rival, and the company that owns them is Czech, and so we actually lost on jurisdiction initially in the federal trial court, and we appealed that. Basically, they said, well, we don't have enough of a connection to the U.S. To be facing civil liability in court here, even though the U.S. is definitely their biggest market. And last month, the appeals court said that there definitely was jurisdiction against this company, and so now that case can move forward.
We've had several instances where the government has taken on pornography. So why are we still having some of these debates 50-something years later?
Yes, some laws can have a deterrent or educational effect just by being passed, but they're generally only as good as their enforcement. And when it comes to enforcement, there are two potential issues, which is capacity and political will. The first is capacity. I mean, even in terms of CSAM, which is the most extreme, the FBI is so inundated with reports of child trafficking, they're only able to respond to those directly impacting infants and toddlers. In 2022, there were over 32 million cyber tip line reports of CSAM to the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children's tip line, and that's a 90% increase since 2019. It was just over 3 years. So we're past the capacity of law enforcement to respond to everything, which makes it that much more important that there be a path towards civil lawsuits against these companies, because there has to be essentially mass accountability, mass enforcement through lawsuits and through criminal prosecutions for there really to be a change in the incentives they currently have to just keep on as they are. The use of pornography is so pervasive and so widespread, it's not difficult to imagine how there could be a failure of political will in some respects if someone, especially, the majority of people, I think, making a lot of these investigative, charging, and prosecutorial decisions are men. If they're using and they're complicit, it can be, that's just kind of setting things up, for it to not be taken seriously or for people to be kind of in denial about how bad it is.
One of Nicosi's biggest battles is around informed consent. And in some ways, it sounds self-explanatory, but we're not lawyers. So what is informed consent?
Off the top of my head, I think informed consent means someone has been told of the potential risks of what it is they're consenting to do and given adequate time to think about those, to consider them, to seek legal advice if they want to, and then decide what they want to do. You introduce anything else, time pressure, physical intimidation, drugs and alcohol, lack of information about the potential risks, then it's definitely not informed consent.
I asked Christen to give us a real-life example of when informed consent was obviously violated.
So one of the main channels on Pornhub, one of their big content partners, was called Girls Do Porn. And it was a case of clear coercion and fraud involving adult women. The women were told they were being considered for modeling gigs. And then they were flown to San Diego. And then on arrival, the perpetrators told them, oh, just kidding, this is actually for pornography, but it's only going to be on DVDs. It's only going to be private collections in some other country. You don't have to worry about anything. And then they gave the women drugs and alcohol and just rushed them to sign the contracts. And in some cases, they actually did threaten them with legal action if they backed out, which goes back to that abuse of legal process piece of the coercion definition. Or they just physically, because they were women in this hotel room and it was men, they were like blocking the door. And so they felt like they couldn't leave till they did the scenes. And the videos were distributed to the world through Pornhub. Informed consent is an important concept in legal and medical contexts that just isn't. I mean, I've seen some of the contracts that women have signed for some of this stuff. It doesn't even come close to the concept of informed consent. Not that consent is enough, because I think the exploitation, the objectification is still present. Like, you can't really consent your way out of the uneven power dynamics that are involved here, but there isn't even an attempt with the industry. It's not something that would pass muster in any other contractual context.
There is a problem in the porn industry around the concept of consent. An 18-year-old can walk onto a porn set with a basic outline of a scene, have a director control every aspect of the set, and be asked to do things that they aren't particularly comfortable with in real time, all with the pressure of a crew, lights, and the threat of not being paid, and then be asked to consent on video to what took place in the scene after the fact. They get paid once, but those videos are online forever, and currently there isn't anything the performer can do about it. And many, many performers would love the opportunity to take down that content.
She's quit the business. She'd like to put porn behind her. Not that you'd get that impression if you look on the internet.
The website is still up and running. The contract has run out.
The age to go into the industry should not be 18. You're putting contracts in front of 18-year-old girls that have the words in perpetuity on them. Do you know how dangerous and predatory that is?
I send a very strong message to young girls. Don't do porn. You can never work with children after you do porn. You can never work in a medical field after you do porn. And these are things that teenage girls don't think about.
I was in that industry for a total of 8 months. I completely withdrew from porn. My Instagram just blew up, and then that's actually what made me #1 on Pornhub as well, was from growing my Instagram. And then people were like, oh wow, there's this hot girl on Instagram and I can also watch her here. So then it drove traffic to Pornhub. I've clicked on a few of the profiles just to see who it's coming from, and a lot of it is kids. I'm like, wow, I did not realize that I had so many underage followers.
In 2019, a bill called S-5054 was introduced in the United States Senate. The bill states that websites showing pornographic images must ensure people in the images are of legal age to consent to sex and obtain signed consent forms from each performer. The websites are also required to create a pathway to remove the images if a performer withdraws consent. The legal process can be long and arduous. To even get a new piece of legislation to be considered is a victory, but it can take years for a bill to be passed. We wanted to talk to an individual who fought to fix the system and get an idea of what it looks like for a bill to go from draft to being passed into law. You're about to meet Kayleigh Kozak, and we sat down on the Capitol lawn, and she told me her story of how she stood up to a broken system, protected herself from an abuser, and got a law passed that will help protect thousands of victims of sexual assault.
So I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. So I was sexually abused when I was 12 and 13 by my PE teacher, who was also my club soccer coach. I was trapped. I couldn't escape him until I switched schools and soccer teams, ultimately stepped out of that bubble. And when I turned him in, they said they had to report it, and I begged them not to, because I knew he had told me if I turned him in, if I ever told anybody, not only would I get in trouble, he would get in trouble. And so we had to do a confrontation call, and he admitted to everything, and they arrested him the next day.
At first glance, while this is extremely tragic, this case seems pretty cut and dry. A coach admits to abusing a child and gets arrested. It sounds like the way the system is supposed to work.
He was facing 25 years in prison. And the week I turned him in, we went to a club soccer tournament in Tucson, and the entire club was wearing shirts that said, "We support our coach." And it only got worse. The founder of the soccer club bailed him out of jail after hearing the phone call of him admitting to everything he did to me. And ultimately, my parents decided to accept a plea deal because of the hell that I'd been through. 6 months in jail and 2 terms of lifetime probation. So he never went to prison. And my parents accepted that because they thought he would be on probation for his entire life. They also were under the assumption that he would be on the public registry, and they wanted him to have that scrutiny. He was, in my opinion, the typical offender. What we were taught is to look out for the scary guy in the van. That's not who we need to be looking out for. We need to be looking out for the charming narcissist that's grooming the people around them. And that's what he was. Everybody loved him. He would never do these things, and he very much did. And he admitted to it, which is the craziest part about all of it. So after my case closed, my dad left after 23 years, and my mom got on pills really bad. And I found myself 16, taking care of my younger siblings, working full-time, and going to school. I did meet my husband in high school, and I ended up getting pregnant my senior year of high school and had a baby. But I still graduated high school. Life kept going. You know, that's the thing is, when you turn your perpetrator in, that's probably the hardest part, is what comes next. And no one talks about that.
63% of sexual assaults are never reported to the police, and only 12% of child sex abuse is reported to the authorities. There's a lot of reasons people stay silent, but when a victim does come forward, they often have to fight for their credibility.
It's easy for victims to stay silent. It's hard for them to come out and admit to what happened to them. And in 2020, my life turned upside down. Not for the reason that everyone else's did, but because I got a phone call notifying me that my perpetrator has been good and has been an ideal probationee, and therefore he's eligible to have the terms of his probation lifted. And when I asked what protection would be available to me, they told me nothing. There's no such thing as post-probation protection. And I said, wait a second, so he can just contact me, show up at my kids' sporting events? And they said, yeah. And I said, that's bullshit. So from the time I got that phone call to his court date, I had 3 weeks to process what was going on. And not a word had been spoken to me in 13 years about this. And I ultimately decided to go to court. And I asked the judge not to lift his probation, because if the judge did, I would be left with no protection. Ultimately, his probation was not lifted. Nobody should have to go back and face the person who has harmed them, especially as a child, and ask for protection. Boy, did I open Pandora's box. I didn't realize what I was walking into. I knew we needed a law that gave victims protection, but I didn't know what that meant or how it was going to happen. I just knew I was going to do it. So unfortunately, then COVID happened and the world fell apart. And 8 months went by, and every month that went by, I felt like it was worse and worse for me, because in Arizona, every third Friday is sex offender release day. So these guys get to petition to have their probation modified and or lifted, and they get off their probation, and then victims were left with no protection. So
between 12 to 24% of known or adjudicated sex offenders will reoffend. So the concern of victims when a perpetrator gets released is very understandable.
October 30th, 2020, I decided today's the day I changed my life. Like, I can't live like this anymore. I was not okay. And I thought about taking my life that day. I was making my kids' bed, and I thought a note under each of their pillows. And for some reason on my phone, a podcast popped up, and it was Andy Frisella's 75 Hard. And I listened to it, and I thought, maybe I'll just try this. And that program saved my life, because it enabled me. I couldn't do day by day. It was too heavy. So it was task by task. And that same day, October 30th, I called my local legislator's office until they decided to answer the phone and schedule a meeting. So October 30th, 2020, my life changed forever. So fast forwarding through that, we drafted Bill 1412. A victim could petition the court for an injunction that was valid for a lifetime. So I called, I had no idea what I was doing. And the first time I went, I took my file. I was ready to give them all the information to get this bill going. And they said, well, we'll look into it. And then in January, they called and said, hey, we drafted your bill. Like, you drafted my bill? I don't even know what that means, but okay. And it's a hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. My legislator prepared me for a long journey. We had our first meeting, and it was with a lot of reputable high-up people within the Supreme Court, people within the county attorney's office, you know, how we're going to proceed with this. And I learned very quickly that this bill was an empty bill. So then I started studying different bills and looking at the language. And language in bills is essential and critical. So we redrafted with an amendment and we created an entirely new chapter in Arizona under the injunction that this injunction, it's called a natural life injunction, and it is valid for the defendant's natural life. Now, what we did was first of all, lifetime does not have a definition in any state. Lifetime is not a lifetime. It's perception and what they pick. So by putting natural in there, we'd close that loophole. And people came out of the woodworks. Defense attorneys were coming out because a natural life injunction is a hefty sentence. And so they argued that it was too much. And my argument to them was, if a defendant can have all the other terms of their probation lifted and get a second chance, would a judge be more inclined to lift the terms of their probation if this natural life injunction was in place and they couldn't contact their victim? Now I have prosecutors, even judges saying, actually, I would be more inclined to lift all the other terms of their probation, knowing there's a direct consequence in place through this law. So I learned very quickly how to play the game.
These laws are written and passed on a state-by-state basis. But to give you an idea of how difficult it is to pass a new law on a state or national basis, over the last 10 years, Congress has passed an average of 391 new laws a year. And in 2023, it passed 27, including one introducing a new commemorative coin and 2 that renamed medical facilities. In 2023, Kayleigh's home state of Arizona drafted 1,759 new bills. And of those 1,759, 382 passed.
So when you can sit down with somebody, you can make it relatable or look at it from their perspective, you can be more impactful. They declared it as Kayleigh's Law. So in Arizona, Kayleigh's Law gives victims of most notably sexual crimes, but also some domestic violence crimes, the option to petition the court for an injunction that is valid for the defendant's natural lifetime. We were the first state in the nation to pass this law. In 2022, Wisconsin passed this law, so they were the second state in the nation. And it had complete bipartisan support in both states. So a Republican governor has signed this into law and a Democrat governor has signed this into law, and no one has ever argued against it because it's pretty cut and dry. And legislatively, these bills don't have to be complex and fluffed. If you're narrow and specific with your language, they can be pretty cut and dry. We just need people going in and doing that. When we have constituents like myself going in and saying, wait a second, that says they may be sentenced, that's empty. It needs to say they shall be sentenced. It's those little words that make all the difference. God has allowed me to go through the things that I've gone through to shine light into this dark place and to be a voice for those who can't be.
Since it was originally drafted, Kayleigh's Law has been passed in 2 states and is set to go through the legislative process in Missouri in 2024. Kayleigh's goal is to have this passed in all 50 states.
There are a lot of companies out there working against you, your marriage, or your family. You've heard about them on this show, but here's one that is on your side. Our friends at Covenant Eyes. For over 23 years, Covenant Eyes has been the #1 trusted software for Christians seeking to live a porn-free life. I know pornography isn't an easy topic to hear about, but it must be talked about. It's a silent killer. Porn is damaging marriages and families and impacting the work of the church by holding people hostage to this secret sin. Maybe you've experienced this in your own life or seen this in the life of someone you love. Victory by Covenant Eyes is a powerful tool that helps Christians who are serious about quitting porn or never starting to begin with. Victory combines industry-leading technology with decades of experience and leadership in recovery content, accountability, and behavior change. Victory software has a powerful built-in feature and an optional blocking technology, making it an unparalleled tool in the fight to live a porn-free life. Scripture teaches us the importance of being accountable. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. So now let's talk about how the Victory app works. First, using the link provided in the show notes or by visiting covenanteyes.com and entering code BROOME30, you can download Victory on all your devices. Next, you'll find a trusted friend to be your ally. This is someone who can walk beside you through the ups and downs of recovery. Your ally will get push notifications of any porn use and reminders to have accountability conversations. The Victory app remains the hub for your recovery journey for you and your ally. You'll find biblical, recovery-centric courses for yourself, your ally, and even your spouse. There's a conversation feature that allows allies to react to activity, ask a question, or send an encouragement or prayer request privately and within the accountability context. And remember, accountability is not others calling you out on your sin, but others calling you up to the person you are in Christ. So what are you waiting for? Anyone can get started on their path to recovery for free by visiting covenanteyes.com and entering code BROOME30, BROOME, and the number 30, or by clicking the links in the show notes today.
In the last episode, Josh had proposed to Hope.
I wanted to marry her right away. I thought I knew what love was until I met her. And then I experienced love for the first time, really. And her patience with me, her ability to see capacity within me that I didn't see within myself, like possibilities for me that I didn't see for myself. Like, she sees the best in me when I'm my worst. Like, the way that she loves me, I never thought I deserved it or it was possible. And just like sitting with her and discovering like she truly cares about people, and she's so smart, and she loves kids, and has this ability to teach things in a way that no matter how complicated it is, she can make it simple.
In 2016, Josh and Hope got married.
The day we got married, it was the middle of July. We were worried about it raining and just all this stuff. And I remember we were back and forth of doing a first look. But we decided to do that. And probably was best because I'm pretty emotional when it comes to her. But my mom and Hope's mom were doing the final touches, like for like the tabletops and the flowers and all that stuff, and just really neat. And I got there and like I remember standing there and how it wasn't so hot. Like sitting there in that tux became very hot, but I'm like sweating and nervous and heart's like gonna beat through my chest, and turned around and saw like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The wedding ceremony, we wrote our own vows. And I remember I was doing pretty good. I was like managing my emotions pretty good because I was just like speaking instead of reading. Because I think if I was reading it, I would have been more emotional. And I was good. And then all of a sudden I hear my mom go, like my mom makes the sound of like someone crying, and I just like lose it. I just like fell apart. And everything I said after that was like through tears, and like hope someone where she's either like an emotional 10 or she's like a solid 3, like all the time. So she's just good at everything, you know. It's almost but she did great. And then we said I do, and we kissed, and it was just this beautiful moment.
Leaning into their passion for fitness, they started a gym together and started looking for a church.
And there's this new church. Essentially, I sit down with the pastor. I'm like, hey, here are the things that I've been doing the past few years. Here's some things that I'm good at. We're starting a gym. Pretty much, I've got like 2 months until the equipment gets here. I can't do anything. And I'm like, how can I serve you guys? And his response was, you should go to seminary. I was like, sure. I mean, that's something I'm thinking about, but I'm talking about like right now. Like you literally need like boards moved, and like, because they purchased a building downtown that was like, you know, falling apart, and they were rebuilding it. And his response was indefinitely like, yeah, man, you should go to seminary. That's what you should do with your time. It's like, okay, great. So I was like, you don't need anything from me. He's like, I think that's where you should focus your time. So pretty much he did not want me to be involved in anything, which was really hurtful. And honestly, that was the case for 3 other churches in the area. I wasn't trying to be on staff. I wasn't looking for a job. I had a full-time job. We're running a gym, but I just wanted to serve the church. You want me to open doors? Great. Just kind of got shunned. So that was frustrating. That's when I started making social media content.
Today, Josh's social media account is filled with gospel-centric content, but it didn't start that way. He started off with what he knew best, fitness content and a lot of positivity.
It's probably less spiritual and more like positive. It's like, hey, if you saw someone that was overweight in the gym today and they were there, instead of thinking rude thoughts, change your perspective and be glad they're there and maybe even give them a high five. So those are the kind of videos that I would make.
At this time, Josh's ministry is growing and so is his family. Josh and Hope found out that they were going to have a baby and that there was a job opening for a church in Moore, Oklahoma.
We were like relatively newly, married. We were pregnant. I applied to as an associate pastor at a church in Moore, Oklahoma, Life Church. I did everything that I sucked at. It was a lot of like systems and paperwork and admin, but at the same time did a lot of pastoral care, funerals, being with people on their deathbed, walking with people mourning, seeing people come to Christ at an astronomical rate. Amazing season.
In 2019, they welcomed their first child into the world. One more way that God showed himself to Josh was through the birth of their son, Cannon.
So I'm coaching a CrossFit class, and Hope would always come to the 5:15 a.m. class. And we were doing a workout with deadlifts and wall balls. And she was doing this on purpose because she was a few days over her due date, going ham, 9 months pregnant, in the middle of summer, sweating her tail off. And she stops and just goes to the bathroom. I was like, something's wrong. And then I grabbed the first girl in the class that I knew well enough. I was like, hey, Cheryl, you need to go to the bathroom right now and check on Hope. And they go, and Cheryl and Hope comes back. She's like, I think my water broke. I was like, oh my Lord. I was like, what are we going to do? I was like, do I need to get hot water? Do I need towels? What do we need? She's like, we're going to go home and I'm going to do my makeup and then we're going to go to the hospital. I'm like, what? You're crazy. You're going to have this baby. She's like, I'm fine. So we go home and this woman does her makeup and I'm like, oh. So I'm freaking out. And just to give you an example of who she is, as I go through the house, there's sticky notes that I've somehow not saw, but she said they've been up for 2 weeks. They're sticky notes. Our toothpaste and toothbrush are in a toiletry bag. Here's the toiletry bag is in here. Your clothes are packed in this bag. My clothes are packed in there too. Don't worry about grabbing anything. Put this in here. So I'm following the instructions and she's getting her makeup done. And then we go, so she's in the hospital and they're like, you're only dilated, whatever. And so you're not close. Fast forward almost 24 hours. I have not ate. I'm on edge for so long. I think my mom forced me to eat half a sandwich or something. And then it goes down. As he's being born, I start feeling a little loopy and I go down to one knee. And this nurse out of nowhere breaks a smelling salt and sticks it in my face, and then I'm back. And I'm back in the game nothing happened. And then he's born. And it's just the most beautiful thing in the world. And I'm crying and Hope's crying and he's still all slimy and stuff. And I'm so overwhelmed and delirious. They've wiped him off and he's breathing and the umbilical cord has been cut and all that stuff. I just walk over there and I reach my hand in his direction and, afraid that I'm going to hurt him or is my hand clean enough or, and then he just grabs my finger and I cried and cried. And I felt God whisper in my spirit, in my mind, I love you more than that. As much as you feel love for him right now in the same way you feel like you would die for him, even though you've only been in his presence for moments? I died for you. Why? Because I love you that much, and even more. And how could I be a dad? I've never experienced it or seen it really done. So in that moment, truly understanding that my Father in heaven loved me, and through me understanding that I was his son, allowed me to see myself worthy of being his dad.
Over 5 billion people have access to the internet. And from the perspective of a follower of Jesus, that's a pretty large mission field, with an opportunity to go where people are, where ideas are exchanged, and where meme culture is an enormous part of the language of social media.
I see you don't have a lifeguard here at your beach.
I'm not at the beach, this is a bathtub.
Josh was part of a meme that went viral. With the resurgence of his past, he decided to take that opportunity to share his testimony.
Probably 50% of the people didn't know it was from a porn. They just thought it was a meme. Because memes are like, there is no context often for a meme, you know? Often they have nothing to do with what's actually going on. I'm like, okay, well, easy. I'm gonna put, you might recognize me from this, and I'm like, this is who I am now. And I shared, it was like a carousel of photos. It was like me getting baptized, me like worshiping in church, me getting married, and now me preaching. And it went pretty crazy. Within 48 hours, I had 100,000 followers, and it got like 7 million views.
Josh had a tremendous response to him using the meme as part of a way he told his redemption story. Most of those comments were uplifting and even freeing for the audience. However, some of the comments were less than encouraging.
A former porn star saying that porn is bad really ticks a lot of people off that watch porn. Performers who are in the industry have reached out to me in frustration. People who are followers of Jesus that justified in some way reached out to me in frustration, and a multitude of people that love watching porn that see it as no big deal, and even furthermore, a betterment to their lives in society, have reached out to me in frustration. And what I've come to realize is that it all flows out of brokenness. It used to happen 10 to 20 times a day, every week. It used to be overwhelming. It doesn't happen as much as it used to, but it still happens on a weekly basis. We're talking about something that is people's gods. What I love, I want to protect. You can't take this from me because it's so important. So where there's fear, there's anger. So that's what I've been able to see. And there's some days where it stings more than others, but I would just say it is living my life as a light, living my life as an ambassador for Christ, living my life as an agent for change for the many, because I saw it as impossible.
People started to look to Josh as an expert in the dangers of the porn industry. The more he was asked about it, the more that he wanted to make a tangible difference. On top of that, churches started to invite Josh in to teach the Bible and share his radical testimony. He travels the nation to preach the gospel. And these are full circle moments where he uses his past to point to God's grace and invite others into the same relationship that changed his life.
Because the Spirit of the living God dwelling within you, if you just gave your life to Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of the living God is in you.
Josh had a way of connecting with his audience through vulnerability and open conversation. The more people he connected with, the more testimonies he heard about people struggling with porn. He wanted to stop the porn industry from damaging people in the first place, both performers and consumers. But how do you stop a $100 billion industry?
It started with who is at the front lines doing stuff like this. And I just, started emailing people. I reached out to them and was like, hey, here's my story. I believe that I can contribute. I want to be part of what you're doing. How can I speak? Like right off the jump, Dawn Hawkins, the CEO and founder of Nicosi, she asked me to speak at this national summit.
This summit was held in Washington, D.C., and so our team went with Josh to Capitol Hill.
Morning, everybody. This is the captain speaking. We're about an hour out from our destination. Weather on the ground looks good. The ground crew is reporting sunny and 68, just perfect for landing. Some light wind, so we might have a little bit of turbulence coming in, but we should be on the ground in about 58 minutes.
Part of what Josh is doing to be a light to others is advocating for legislation surrounding the retroactive withdrawal of consent in the industry and age verification.
I've been partnering with Nicosi for about a year and a half. I should be able to go before a judge and say, I was compensated $700 16 years ago for this one piece of content.
It's done
its course. Yeah. Put a time period on it where I could say, hey, I want to withdraw my consent. It's sexually explicit. You do not have my consent for that to be up there. Please take it down. So something like that was proposed. Like literally, if I could take one piece of imagery down off the internet or like one video down off of Pornhub, there's literally people who have taken their life because they've been told this will never happen. A subsidiary part of the bill was around rescinding of consent. And I think that it makes sense. So anything that was on the internet that you have given consent for, if it's been there for 10 years and you identify, and multiple people would agree that it's sexually explicit, and you say, I did say yes to this at one time, but I am not the person that I used to be. And then furthermore, regardless if that's true, I no longer want that up there. Maybe it's different now, but when I was in the industry, residual compensation didn't exist. There are no royalties or residuals. That's a very common question I get asked. Did I give the money back? And am I still making royalties and residuals? I've never received a residual payment or a royalty for anything I've done associated with pornography or sex work of any kind. I've never made a cent. I should be able to say to a judge, this is sexually explicit. I rescind my consent. I want it to be taken down. And since I was compensated 10 years ago, X amount of dollars, we would be in agreement that it is made significantly more than what I was compensated for. So it would be fair for me to say, I don't want that imagery or that video of me up there anymore. I rescind my consent. And then they would have a timetable to take it down, or they would be susceptible to a significant fine.
While Josh is trying to create an avenue for himself and other performers to withdraw consent, he's also a father of 4 boys and wants to protect children from the dangers of porn.
There's several bills around age verification and the protection of children that have made a lot of progress since, specifically Nicosi. So 2 years ago, the first time I spoke at Capitol Hill, the bill that I was advocating for was the Earn It Act. Part of the Earn It Act was age verification. There's several bills around age verification where, essentially you're shutting down access to anything that is sexually explicit, and to get access to it, you've got to provide government-issued ID. It protects children from seeing things because the data tells us that 84% of children that are exposed to pornography, 14 and under, it happens through secondary exposure, meaning that either someone showed it to them or they were on a unprotected device where, there was no software that was installed to prevent access to anything that was sexually explicit. And they were Googling something that was for a biology project, and they scrolled down too many times and they see hardcore pornography.
In the same way that you need a photo ID to open up a bank account, This bill would require an ID in order to access porn sites. The goal is to protect children from accessing porn. The porn industry knows that this will lead to a fraction of the views that they get, and they're working hard to block it.
And now to a legal battle over access to porn in Utah. The state of Utah now facing a lawsuit over its new law requiring adult websites to verify people's ages. Adult content creators and what's called the Free Speech Coalition filed the lawsuit against Utah yesterday. They help creative film artists fight against censorship. Well, the new Utah law they're fighting passed earlier this year and officially went into effect yesterday. The lawsuit is seeking to overturn the Utah law. The filing follows popular website Pornhub blocking access to everyone in Utah over the same law.
TV shows and popular podcasters became interested in Josh's story and his work in D.C. and wanted him to talk about his experiences. It seemed like everyone, no matter where they were coming from, wanted to hear the story of the prodigal porn star and the God who changed his life.
Welcome back. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Joshua Broome.
Welcome to Tucker Carlson State. Our next guest, Joshua Broome.
Joshua, thank you so much for joining us. I know a lot of people have heard your testimony, maybe on other podcasts.
Joshua, pleasure to have you. Yeah, absolutely.
It's easy to look at Josh now and see a man who has overcome the impossible. To get here, he had to learn to let go of his past and trust God with his future. Yet he remembers a time he was certain his life would never amount to anything.
And I was so certain that I have a piece of paper that I still have where I wrote down, here is why I want to die. I will never be a father. I will never be married. I will never contribute in a way that causes people to believe that they can achieve more than they believe they can.
Everything on that list of nevers has happened. Josh did get married. He and Hope have 4 boys, and I've seen firsthand what an amazing husband and father he's become. And he is contributing. He's helping a world see that their past does not have to define them, but that there's a God who redeems all. In this series, we've taken you on a journey from coast to coast, from a small town in South Carolina to Hollywood Boulevard to our nation's capital. But before we wrap up, let's take one more trip together to LA. Remember that table at Saddle Ranch? Our team went back there with Josh, and we ate a meal at the exact table where Josh was recruited into the industry. And we recorded a conversation between Josh and the waiter.
We brought you guys out here, or here, and then to Dallas.
Well, here is probably the most interesting one of all of it. So he used to work here.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
we love to hear it.
And at this table, got recruited into the porn industry, and got out of that about 10 years ago.
Congratulations.
And so we're doing a podcast on kind of his life story.
Oh wow!
And so we're out here recording for that.
Yeah, it's like I went from working here, and I was in the industry for 6 years and did like over 1,000 films, and like found that it wasn't all that I thought it would be. Yeah. Even though I made the money and got the fame and the awards and all that stuff, it was like I moved out here to be an actor. I moved out here to create, and I ended up experiencing this very counterfeit version of what I thought was going to make me happy. Once I left that industry, I carried all the shame, and it was like when I had a personal encounter with Jesus, and like me giving my life to Jesus was the pivot point in my life where everything changed, because I finally found the thing that I was essentially like out here searching for.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that is as full circle as you can come.
Thank you for listening to Unmentionable. My hope, after hearing my story and a tremendous amount of data, is that you are now equipped to make either a decision to not continue consuming the thing that's consuming you, or have a very informed conversation with someone you care about, because the data tells us either you will find yourself hearing this podcast and struggling with pornography, or you are someone that has experienced freedom, or maybe you've never struggled with this, but there's most certainly someone in your life that needs to know that they do not have to stay stuck where they are. As my wife shared with me, you are not defined by the worst thing you've ever done. and you're not defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do. There is a God that created you, that wants to know you, and from the understanding that you are accepted, that you are beloved by God, from that place, you can stop striving for more and operate out of the satisfaction and the wholeness that comes with being in a relationship with Jesus. In addition to that, I have written a book called 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. And this book, yes, it has aspects of my testimony. Yes, it has tools and practical applications on how to stop watching pornography. It really examines the heart. You see, we are born into brokenness with a broken heart, and we cannot trust our gut. We cannot follow our heart because it's going to lead us to a place that is broken. And that's what the book is about. It's about confronting lies that the world promises to be true, lies that the world says you can find happiness and satisfaction in the approval of others. You can find intimacy in pornography and random hookups. If you have enough money, if you have enough status, you'll feel satisfied. But all those things lead to loneliness and despair. But there is a truth that leads to life. There is a truth that leads to freedom. And when I discovered that truth, the first thing I wanted to do was tell everyone. So that's what this book is about. This book is about lessons I've learned on the other side of healing, and I believe it's a recipe book for healing from a multitude of things, from father wounds, from pornography, through feeling like because you've done something you feel disqualified, and much more. So I am just so grateful that you took the time to listen to this, and I hope it equips you and empowers you and encourages you, and I'm so thankful that you chose to listen.
By now, you know that real, lasting redemption is possible. And if you or someone you love is struggling with pornography, that same redemption is available to you. Together with Josh, we created a simple and effective course that'll help you become unbound from porn addiction. And because we don't want price to be a barrier, Unbound has a flexible pay-what-you-can pricing. If you want to be free, go to compel.studio/unbound and sign up to get access to this course. Believe it or not, there's more to Josh's story. You can purchase Josh's book, 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life, via the link in the show notes or wherever you buy books. Season 1 may be over, but there's more unmentionable things left to discuss. If you haven't already, sign up and be the first to get future release updates at www.compel.studio. Unmentionable was written by Lee Shelton, Jacob Jolly, and Tyler McKinney. Thank you guys for the fact-checking and making sure that we communicated this story with clarity. Directed and hosted by Lee Shelton. All the incredible graphics that you've seen on social media and the email updates you received were done by Jacob Jolly. Kathleen Terrill is our production executive, which means that she herded the cats and worked tirelessly to see this thing happen. Edited sometimes late into the night to make sure that you had episodes to listen to on Tuesdays by Tyler McKinney and assisted by Jacob Jolly. Every note of music in this podcast was written and recorded by Tyler McKinney. Joshua Broome, thank you for trusting us with this incredible story. Thank you for helping us set up the many interviews, the expertise that you shared with us, and traveling the country with myself, Tyler, and Jacob to tell it in the most compelling way possible. Special thanks to our guests, Heidi Olson, Samantha Summers-Rivas, Christen Price, and Kayleigh Kozak. This episode wouldn't have happened without Alex Lewis, Craig Denison, Tim Ross, and Justin Moates. Thank you for believing in this project and helping us share it with the world. And Justin, thanks for driving us around LA. We also want to thank our families who allowed us to work long hours, sometimes well into the night, and all the travel that went into this production. Thank you for believing in this project, for believing in this team, and for believing in us. Get ready, because there's so much more to come. You can follow us on Instagram at compel.studio for updates on all our future releases. And thank you for listening. Unmentionable is a production of Compel Studio.